Welcome to the Cow StoryLab podcast, where we get under the hood of fiction and talk craft and process and choices that writers make that readers maybe never see, maybe sometimes they do. These topics we hope are for authors and readers alike. I'm Michael MacBride, an author, co-founder of Cow Productions, and co-host of this podcast. And if you love how and why great storytelling begins, I think you're in the right place. And for now, I'll turn it over to fellow author and other co-founder of Cow and co-host, Rob Jung. Rob, who do we have joining us today?
Thank you, Michael. Well, joining us today are three superlative writers. Christine Husom, who hails from Buffalo, Minnesota, and is the writer of two cozy mystery series. Marjorie Matheson Hance, who likes to kill people in the North Woods, fictitiously, I hope, who writes the Pelican Lake Murder series, and Michael Mallory, who writes the Detective Harry Lau series. We have a fourth panelist about to join us, John Heckenlabel. Hey, John.
Hey there. Sorry about that. I was doing some volunteer work and I'm on a different time zone.
Yeah, we thought maybe it was a time zone issue. John is well, he's in Arizona right now, but he is a native of New Prague, Minnesota, and has written a book that is, I think, probably somewhat autobiographical, but it is fictitious. But anyway, we're just about to kick off, John, with Michael's got the first question for everybody. So
the question really, and kind of the prompt, I guess, is some stories don't start with a body on page one for those who write murders and mysteries and that kind of thing. Sometimes it's a grocery store parking lot or a quiet marriage, a small town lunch counter. And the question really is to all of you, how do you turn everyday life into something unputdownable? Or to ask another way, like, what is the most mundane thing that sparked a story? And I figure we'll just kind of go around. So, Marjorie, you happen to be immediately to my right as far as my screen is concerned. So if you have some thoughts, I'd love to hear what you have to say there.
Oh, I do. Well, I started thinking about what mundane thought started my writing. And I have a lake home on Pelican Lake, and I have a sheriff from another small town that lives a few doors down from me. And his dog was always on the loose. You know, we have rules against that, but his dog he never followed the rules. So I was really used to seeing his dog run across our yard, poop in our yard, you know, constantly in our yard. And one day I stopped to think about this because this was pretty ordinary. And I thought, what's behind the ordinary is here's a sheriff who is the only one on the beach who doesn't keep that law, who breaks the law. and that started it. And so he became a sheriff who breaks the law, became a player in my book. But it was really that dumb thing of watching his dog and then stopping to think about it. And, you know, I often think about that, like the ordinary is sort of the wallpaper. It's the backdrop. It's not usually what you even pay attention to. And so I think as authors, part of our job is how do you find something that's really extraordinary in that ordinary? And that can be very fun.
I love it. Michael, you happen to be to the right of her as far as I'm concerned as well. You want to add to that or spin your own story?
Sure. Thank you. That's an easy and difficult question, but I'll go with the answer that I was just thinking of. In my first in this book, the Lost Dragon Murder, it begins quietly on the lead character is introduced. He's had a physical workout, and he's leaving, and he's a little achy, and it's at Lake Street, Minneapolis, at night in October. He's going to his car, looking forward to a hot shower, leftovers, when he hears a noise. And there's something going on across the street, and he's a police detective, and he has to check it out. And he suspects there's a mugging or worse, and he's right. Someone's getting beaten up. he has to check it out. He fights them off.
Mhm.
And of course, this propels the story into a whole new direction. But it starts with him just being tired after a nice workout.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure. And something I assume other people could relate to. Like you hear that noise and you don't know what you're going to find. But Chris, how about you?
Um, well, ideas come from everywhere. And as you know, I work for the Wright County Sheriff, so I got a lot of ideas just from, spark from all the things that happened. And, they're inspired several of my books in the Winnebago County series. But I've written different things over the years, and I think you have to get something that makes people want to keep reading. So even if it sort of starts as a simple story, what is it that makes them want to keep reading? So to me, it's characters. But writing my Winnebago County mysteries, I pretty much throw people into the crime or the situation pretty fast within the first couple of pages. And with my snow globe shop mysteries, it's a little more, build a little bit of tension, what's going on. The first snow globe shop mystery starts where, some bad guy is back in town and everybody's kind of upset. Well, they're getting ready for this snow globe making class. And as it turns out, Gerald Powers, the bad guy, is his ex-wife who's teaching the class, and his ex-girlfriend is there. And I mean, so they don't know that until this class, gets going. And so everybody's upset. And so you kind of have that tension going on. And then Cammie, when she leaves, she's going to walk through the park and, she finds this dead body, a guy with a knife in his back. So that kind of takes us into the whole aspect of the amateur sleuth. But yeah, so
So you ease them into the dead body, but it happens fairly quickly.
it happens not too fast, not too long.
Great. What about you, John? I know you don't write murder mysteries in this case, but I'm curious, like what are some of the mundane things that you drew inspiration from?
Well, thank you. I do feel a little bit out because I don't have a body in my dead body in my book. So, so being from a small town, um, a lot of the catalyst or genesis or whatever you want to call it came from a bar. You kind of talked about in your initial question the lunch counter. Well, you think about the cast of characters and the interesting people that are belly up at a bar. Not only the people who are belly up, but the bartender themselves. Each of them has a story, and if you're curious like me, and as writers, we are all curious, right? But we have to think that our audience is curious, and they might enjoy hearing about the trials and tribulations of this farmer that's sitting at the bar, or this out of work mechanic at this bar, and what led them to where they are now, and how do their lives interact. And that's one of the beautiful things about a small town is their lives do interact. And that was the most fun thing about writing the book is exploring how these disparate lives interact and build on one another to create this community that people don't necessarily want to be there, but there's nowhere else they'd rather be. So that was my inspiration, was looking at these people and thinking, what kind of lives do they lead? Not my life. My life's not important. Their life. And let's have fun exploring what they've been through, because we've all been through stuff, and that's where we get readers, right? Because they kind of want to relate to our characters. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah.
So how do you build tension in a story where, John, I'll go back to you. How do you build tension in a story where where there isn't a dead body, where it is sort of a low key, um, low, rather a slower pace than thrillers. Let's put it that way. How do you put
Well,
tension in your stories?
so it kind of gets back to those characters. Each one of the characters sitting at that bar, living in that town in New Prague, Minnesota, sitting at the getting coffee at the bakery, each one of them is dealing with some sort of conflict or issue. Each one of them has a problem. Maybe each one of them has a little bit of a secret, and it impacts other people. So you can kind of like throw out a little bone here or there that like okay, this person is hiding something, or they're embarrassed about something, or they did something that they're embarrassed about, or they hope nobody else finds out about. And so you can use that to build this kind of tension, or this concern, this fear that people want to know. We all want to know. We all want to know everybody else's dark secrets, because we don't want to talk about our own, right? And so you just throw that out there, and we all have them, and each one of the characters has them. And it's like, how does that impact other people? How does it impact their family? How does it impact their lot in life? And you start peeling away the layers of the onion, and build the tension that way.
I really like what you're saying, John, because I think what you do is you look at the people at the bar, and that looks pretty ordinary. And
Yes.
it looks kind of boring, looks kind of dull,
Yes.
something that goes on
Yeah.
every day. And then what you do is go into the specifics. You go into, so what about this person? What's going on there? What complications are there? And I really like that. I think that's true. I think it's focusing on the specifics, kind of just honing in on the challenges and the fears and the choices that they're struggling with, and all the emotion,
Well,
all the emotion.
thank you, Marjorie. And not to talk about the book, but there's a character in the book, and he's a bartender, and he is a veteran of Guadalcanal. And I think all of us know what Guadalcanal, World War II, is just a nightmare for the soldiers who had to fight there. And he was one of the few survivors in his company, and came back, and it came back, and he's a deeply scarred individual. But nobody knows that. But it speaks to his life and why he lives the life that he lives. And but again, I built tension around him, because so many people misunderstood him, because he carried this dark, horrible memory of surviving Guadalcanal when everybody else in his company died.
Michael Mallory, you have edited, I guess, several anthologies. And when you're looking at you're sorting through the submissions, do you ever come across the short stories that have that sort of slower pace, less dramatic, not so much bombast and violence, that make their way into the anthologies that you edit?
Oh yeah, certainly. And you want that, because you don't want every story to start off exactly the same. You want variety. It's just a matter how skillful the storytelling is. I mean, I was going to say a comment on John's comment is, it's easy, relatively speaking, as a writer, to describe something exciting, because by nature it's exciting. Explosions, gun battles, something like that. The real skill is in describing the mundane, making the ordinary interesting. And that takes a lot of skill. And to go to your question, Rob, it's when I'm reviewing stories for like one of our anthologies, basically, I'm just looking, and the other co-editors are looking for something that's interesting, it's entertaining. I mean, number one, it has to be interesting. It could be slow paced, but it could still be, intriguing, funny, whatever it is. But that's the main thing. I mean, you think of movies or stories where nothing is going on, but the conversations or the interaction between the characters is so interesting, you don't care.
Chris, you write cozy mysteries, which tend to be less violent, and which I think probably have a more leisurely pace than Michael's detective stories. Does that give you an opportunity to develop more of the mundane, or doesn't it, doesn't that seem to pop up in your writing?
Well, I say my books are cozies, but not too cozy. They're traditional mysteries, but they're pretty, they're serious, but with a little lighter tone, a little quirkier characters. I mean, we've got, Pinky Nelson, who's dramatic and gossipy, and she's kind of a good sidekick for Cameron Brooks, who's a little more thoughtful and serious, and feels duty bound to solve these crimes when she stumbles over these bodies. But yeah, I think they're probably gotten a little more serious as I've gone along. I had that 3-book deal with Penguin Random House for my first 3 books. And so I had to, you follow the rules. I mean, there's, I had my first bad guy getting out of prison, and my editor said, oh, he can't be getting out of prison. We can't have, because he was high on drugs or whatever, and he committed a crime. Oh, okay. So I had to scale it back. And so he sold some other property and ended up in a halfway house for a while. So some of those rules, but it's been interesting just with the characters. So, the first bad guy, got stabbed. And I mean, you can kill anybody anyway, except you cannot shoot them. I mean, it's like, okay, isn't strangling a little more personal than shooting somebody? And so you've got kind of some of those rules, but I still like to build the tension and have, like who done it? I mean, a few different characters that could have done it. And so we have to explore that. And I think that that's what kind of helps move the story along too. Like, okay, this person, gosh, they're talking about how strong she is. And, was she responsible, or her husband, or who are these people who are responsible for these crimes? But yeah, I enjoy, I love bringing in new characters. And a lot of times, as I'm not a plotter. So as I'm going along, and it's like, okay, oh, this person walked in, and thank you for showing up because I needed you. So, I mean, I know that I'm the one that brought her in, but that's kind of the way it goes along. And then kind of all of a sudden, and little things are revealed about that person that, oh yeah, that she is a suspect. So yeah. I don't know
Marjorie,
if
there's no right or wrong answers here, But Marjorie, I have a question for you. You set your murder mysteries in Pelican Lake, northern Minnesota, and location is a major part of your story. How do you, and location, if you can make location a character, but if you're just trying to establish a setting for your story, how much of the mundane, how much of the detail do you go into to assist your reader in understanding where they are?
Well, I've really tried hard to focus on the mundane that has a lot of emotion with it. And a lot of ordinary does. I mean, it's been kind of intriguing to me. So at the start of my first book, the main character comes back to the lake. She's had a lot of loss, and she comes back to regroup. But the first thing she does is she goes out on the dock and she smells the unique scent of a lake, wet wood, dead grass, dead fish, cut grass. And, we've all smelled that. We know what it's like, and it's a pretty ordinary smell. It's not like woohoo lake smell. But I've had so many people tell me that when they read that, they go, I know that smell. I know that smell, and that smell is powerful because it brings back nostalgia and family and lake life. And you know, so I try to focus on the things that really grab people and what they feel about the place. Just like, you can look at farmland. We all drive in Minnesota, we drive through farmland all the time, and farmland is farmland. It's not very exciting. But then when you have a character who really gets engaged with the farmland, it's the sunflowers that turn their heads as the sun set. It's the smell of the alfalfa fields. And so probably what we try to do more than anything is really make somebody feel what that's like. And that's it's different in different parts of Minnesota too.
Yeah,
Oh,
I love that. I can't remember the class I was in, but there was a graduate level class where we were studying magical realism. And usually I think about magical realism where it's like the magical becomes ordinary, like people just have wings and whatever, like that stuff just happens. The flip side of this one article talked about how the ordinary becomes magical as well. And so some of the authors will hyper describe something in a way that you've never heard before, but makes you appreciate it in a new way. And so they were arguing that that was an element of magical realism, like kind of the other version of it. And I remember there was this one that was like a description of a snail shell, and it went on for like 7 pages, and it just talked about like the spiral and the detail and the little cracks and like the variations in the color, and it does give you like a new appreciation of that. A slight variation, I guess, Marjorie, from yours, where you were saying like you've neatly encapsulated something that is familiar, and people can immediately go, "I recognize that." But I'm wondering, and I love that smell is one of those things. I think that a lot of times smell and even taste is kind of left out of novels, and we have all these other senses that we could use, but it's so easy to lean into description. I'm curious. I'm thinking about. I don't know, since you just did smell, I'm wondering about like what are some kind of ordinary objects that have found their way into importance in your books? Rocks or who knows what, any kind of random thing that is otherwise maybe overlooked or underappreciated that became vital and important.
so
Sure, John, hit it.
yeah, I mean, how many of us? So first of all, Marjorie, the smell. I don't know if you read my face, but it's just the smell. I mean, I also used that in writing, and one of the smells I talked about was the soft evening smell of carried by the gentle breeze of a freshly mown alfalfa field. Right? Okay. Yeah, we all know that smell. It's that sweet, slightly sweet smell. But so anyhow, you brought that memory back to me. So
you guys inhabit a different world. My smell is like, what does the bar room smell like at 9 o'clock in the morning?
That works.
But
Go ahead, John.
the other thing too that we'll be able to all relate to is, and I'll write about this because it sticks in the back of my head, is the screech of of snow when you're walking on hard packed snow when it's like 10 below. There's nothing like that sound because it goes right up your spine, doesn't it? And so that's one of those mundane things, Michael, that so you have this person walking, they're just burdened with their problems, emotions, whatever they're dealing with, and compounding that is they're walking along the street that's been cleared, but there's still snow on it, and it's that screechy scrunch as they're taking every step, and you feel that pain with every step that they take. So I don't know if you can't get much more mundane than walking through snow.
but as only can be described by somebody who's in Arizona right now. Right. To avoid that screechy sound.
Believe me, that sound is just deep inbred in me. I will never ever forget that sound.
I love that sound, that when you're walking through that snow and just that crunching, it's just like, I don't know, it's so powerful.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Describe it.
Yeah, I
And
But
anybody
definitely.
from Minnesota is going to recognize it. And if
Mm,
you're not from Minnesota, if you're a deft writer, you can really help them understand what
that's
it's
true.
like.
Yeah. But I agree, Marjorie, about the smells in I bring that in also, and it's kind of a key thing in my last book that just came out, "No Place Like Home," where someone breaks into Cammie's house, and she calls her boyfriend, who's the assistant or now the police chief, and she's seen that someone's been in her house, and so they go in, and he's, Clint is looking and checking out all the rooms. There's nobody there, but Cammie smells something, and it's like, okay, what is that? It's a smell that I've smelled before, but what is it? It's like chocolate coffee and something else, but not chocolate coffee. So she's trying to think, where have I smelled it before? Because is it one of Pinky's coffee brews? Pinky owns Brouhaha, the coffee shop next door. And it's just kind of troubling her. And so it's like it's in her mind and she's trying to place it. And then it becomes evident in the final scene what it was. So anyway, but just to have something that, some people just have particularly keen sensitive smell, and she does. It's like, okay, it's not my, I don't use scented cleaning products. It's just vanilla or lavender. And so anyway, but yeah.
Love it. Michael, do you have any sense, since we're on the sense of smell, anything that resonates in your book that way?
Um,
Books?
somewhat. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that's as descriptive as everyone else has said. I mean, I do incorporate the sense of smell when I can, and obviously restaurants and coffee shop smells are easy because that's atmosphere. But something that just popped in my mind, it's not actually me as descriptive. It's sort of uh, going to other people's view of it. There's a scene in the in Tiger Claw, which is a follow-up to the previous book, where um, my two detectives are going to see their boss, and he's sitting down. The chief is explaining something to both Henry and his niece uh, Janet, and they're all kind of concerned because he's got this look on his face, and he makes this statement, and he makes it in a way that's disturbing. And the line is, the statement hung in the air like the smell of a wet dog.
Mm.
good simile. Yeah.
That's good.
I love it.
I have a question based on what Michael MacBride said about the snail. How much is too much? How much of
Yeah.
this the mundane, how much of the description, how much smell is too much smell, how much description of the location is too much?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you know where to scale that back?
That's an easy one. Whatever the editor tells me.
Okay. All right. Anybody got a
Sorry, I
better
couldn't help
answer than
myself.
At least for me, after the seventh or eighth draft, and you've read it that many times, you go, okay, that may be too much, and
that?
you want enough, but not too much to be
Mhm.
boring.
There's, a very popular book that it went on and on and on and on about description. I couldn't read it. It was a bestseller that was made into a movie. I watched the movie and I enjoyed it, but it was like nothing happened. It was just this, description. Yeah. So, and some people love that. Obviously because it was a bestseller, but for me, too much description gets, you just get kind of bogged down. I maybe don't have enough. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels
I
like an exercise or just like, can I do this kind of thing, not a should you do this kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
I would add that, if it's crucial to the scene or something that happens later, it makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, but you can't just describe in detail every single scene, location, situation. It has to be significant enough
Hmm.
for that amount of verbiage.
Yep.
I'm
Yeah, it really has to.
mindful
It has
of
to carry the plot. It has to carry the book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mindful of the first rule of writing by Elmore Leonard. Leave out the parts that the readers skip.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think back, and I think back to well, I'll pick on the Bronte sisters. Wuthering Heights takes 60 pages before the story starts. You know, I mean, it would never get published in today's world, and yet it's a classic.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, for whatever that's worth.
But you're right. It is a fine line because it's coming out of our brain. So we're having fun with it, right? We all have fun with what we're doing, and you want to share this, but then you know what is that fine line? And so I get tired of hearing myself talk. So I figured people are going to get tired of reading what I wrote. So that's a good barometer for me.
Michael, you got a question?
I was reflecting on all. I was trying to find what that book was because now it's driving me nuts. But I was just processing kind of what everybody was saying, and I was thinking about your point, I guess, about the Brontes and like how some of those books wouldn't be published these days, probably. And I was thinking about movies and how there certainly are movies also that move much slower, and sometimes have those very quiet scenes, and yet you're compelled to continue watching them. I'm wondering, I guess, places that you draw inspiration from. I mean, we're talking about ordinary things, but are there other mediums that you have been inspired by where you're like, I saw something there that I want to try in my own writing? What would that look like in a book or something along those lines?
I'm going to go first because nobody else volunteered. But I went to a theatrical production, and it might have been Chorus Line, I think. But as I'm sitting in the middle of the second act and watching what's going on stage, the thought popped into my head of how do you court a chorus girl? And that became one of the many book subjects that I've never written, but I've given a lot of thought to that. But that's sort of an inspiration that still hasn't been fulfilled, but nevertheless, the thought was germinated by watching a live theatrical performance.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Michael, I'll take a stab at your question. So I was somewhat inspired by Manchester by the Sea, which, if you've seen the movie, it's a great movie, but it's also very intimate, and it's about a small town, certainly up in the Northeast, and not much happens, but there's a lot of story there. And I kind of watched that and thought, if they can make a movie out of this, and not downplaying the movie was really, really moving. But if they can make a movie out of something as simple as this little town, Manchester by the Sea, and what happened, I can certainly write a book that's going to be just as interesting. So, I justified it kind of. I used that movie medium to help me be inspired to my novel.
Interesting. Chris, I think when I asked the question, you right before Rob jumped in, it looked like maybe you had something to say, or not. And I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't. So,
No, I mean, so much of I guess my inspiration just comes from, like I mentioned before, incidents that happened with the sheriff's office, but also I was trying to think of an idea for one of my books, and I was a county commissioner at the time, and I was in a meeting with the highway department, and we're doing a road project. One of our county roads was always sinking. And so they'd put this asphalt on top and it was always sinking. Well, as it turned out, I mean, they called it Wolf Swamp. And as it turns out, there was like 60 feet of peat bog underneath it. So that's why it was always sinking. And they came up with this ingenious plan to put foam blocks under the road. And they had done that project in another area and it was successful. And so they went in and it was, I mean, the road would be closed like a few times a year because it was flooded. And anyway, and there was 5 feet of asphalt on top. It's like, okay, that probably helped this thing. But anyway, so I said to Virgil, so when you are going to do this project, do you have to do any road cleanup? And yeah. And I thought, I've seen pictures of bog bodies before. So that became the inspiration for Canes and Coyote Bog. So it's kind of some of those things that it's a mundane thing, a road project that, when you're kind of thinking about, I mean, the mind just goes into overdrive. So then, yeah. So lots of those kind of things are, I mean, somebody setting fires. Well, who is that person? And, I don't know. It's there. The ideas are out there everywhere.
Yeah.
Yep. Marjorie?
Well, by the way, Rob, that's probably going to be your bestseller. The
Yeah.
one about the chorus girl.
On a chorus girl, yeah. Yeah.
Something
It'll be
I think
based
I
on
got
my
inspiration.
personal life experience, it'll be a very short book.
Oh, I see. Well, I got some inspiration from watching specials on the Mexican border, the U.S.-Mexico border. And it struck me, being in Minnesota, that we have a border. We have the Canadian border. And that's mundane. Nobody thinks about the Canadian border. Nobody worries about the Canadian border. And so what I did was I took the Canadian border and instead had somebody kidnap the main character in my book. And he owned under another name, under a pseudonym, he owns property on a lake way up in northern Canada. And he abducted her and was going to get her across the Canadian border. And if he could get her across the border without anyone finding out, she'd probably never be heard from again. And so I tried to take something that was really mundane. I mean, Canadian border, if you've ever been there, is kind of dull. They're counting walleye and tried to put tension and threat into something that we all perceive as pretty mundane.
We were up that way a couple of years ago, and we were probably 20 minutes from the border. And I remember like trying to convince my family, like, we should just go across the border because we can. And they're like, yeah, but what's there?
Yeah.
And honestly, there really wasn't anything there to like convince them that it was worth it. So.
Right.
Well, I have a story about that. About 10, 15 years ago, my wife and I drove up to Thunder Bay just to visit. And because we'd never been there and we've never been back, but we thought, well, let's check out Thunder Bay. So we went across the Canadian border, spent a couple of days at Thunder Bay, then came back. And just as a few minutes after you leave the U.S.-Canadian border, you go by Grand Portage, which is, very near the top of the arrowhead. And it was very wooded, and we're on, I think it's Highway 61, and it's basically it's like a street. And we're going through this wooded area, and I'm driving, and it goes right by this house that's in the woods. And there's a driveway, and the house is close by. There's a mailbox, and as we get close, I say, oh, there's a dog. And this is about 9 o'clock in the morning. And as we get closer, oh, it's not a dog, it's a wolf. Just standing there like it lived there. It just came out in its bathrobe, just checking the newspaper. We just drove by.
Michael Mallory, I have to, that little story reminds me of the fact that you do a really good job of appreciating the ordinary with your Facebook posts, because you regularly post things about I can't remember what the most recent was, but it's you're out someplace and it's the weather or it's it's the wolf in his robe or something, and I find that fascinating, and your post's interesting, and I'm kind of waiting for you to write a story along those lines.
Well, thank you, Rob. And I think that's part of being a writer or a storyteller, is that you sometimes look at things from a different angle or just find something that's so ordinary interesting. We're going back to the question of finding inspiration in different things or arenas. That's certainly one of them, nature or behavior of animals or something. Uh, One of the inspirations for me, at least it used to be more, is like, old news clippings. You could get really good ideas, or even, oh, this was always a good one, News of the Weird. There used to be this
Yeah.
column, and you go, oh my God, that's a great idea for a story. It's just some quirky behavior or something like that. One I remember particularly, this was not News of the Weird, but for some reason, I'm looking at stuff, on the internet. You're just trying to find something, and it was a PDF of a case from the French Sûreté in 1897. Don't ask me why that showed up, but it was about a Sûreté inspector who was looking into a murder on the beach. And they talked about the clues, the footprints, and this and that, and a few other things. And it turned out he was the murderer. He sleepwalked. He realized that it was him. And during a sleepwalking episode, he got out and went out and killed someone and came back. And all the clues pointed to him. And so he quit and turned himself in. I go, holy cow.
Wow.
Wow.
And so I took that story, and we just got back from Switzerland and changed it to Lake Geneva and that area, and made it the Swiss gendarmerie in Geneva. But sometimes you get these gifts.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
no, go
right.
ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, coincidentally, I wrote a book, a murder mystery with 8 other authors, and it was, we each had our own character, and we each had to write it as though that character was the guilty one, but none of us knew until the end who it was. But my character had a form of epilepsy where he would get up and do things and not know that. So it was kind of like related. So, and I kind of felt sad when he was the one that killed the little girl. I didn't want him to be guilty, but he was.
So who got to determine who was the villain then at the end?
The editors, he was a publisher and editor, and so it was quite a sadly it's not in print, and I don't have a print copy of it. So you can get it online, but it's Rubicon Ranch Riley's story, but you can get it. I think you can still get the digital copy, but yeah, he kind of closed up shop, and that was that. But they had a second one also.
So did they know in advance who the killer was, or they just decided at the end?
I don't know. They were taking notes probably as they went along, and who done it, So I think as we each had a chapter, so we had to read prior chapters, kind of. I mean, you're reading other authors' chapters as you went along. And so, yeah, but it was kind of like each character you'd pick up where you left off. But it was a good exercise, actually. Yeah.
I love that idea.
I used to have a group. I was part of a group of 4 couples, and we would do murder mysteries, those boxed murder mysteries you can get. And we would do things like go to the St. James Hotel in Red Wing and do the murder mystery there, or the Lowell Inn and things like that. We did that for 2 years. We did a total of 8 of them. Out of the 8 mysteries, the intellectual character was the murderer in 7 of them.
Oh,
So if you'd ever do one, bet on the intellectual character as the murderer. That's just a little trivia there.
Because they're
Everybody's
bored and they need something to do with their brain.
something to do, yeah. Apparently, I don't know what it
Apparently,
was,
murder's the solution.
but so think of all the books you've read, and which one would you pick out as being sort of arising out of the ordinary? And I'll start because it's kind of an odd question, but there's a book called The House that's written by, oh shoot, what's her name? She lives in Memphis and has her own bookstore and always has bestsellers. Ann Patchett. She wrote this book about 4 or 5 years ago called The House, and the house becomes the primary character in the book. And I always thought of all the strange, sort of mundane things to sort of make as your primary character, and yet it was fascinating. So can anybody else think of a book that they can think of that left them with that kind of a feeling?
I mean, I have another house one, oddly enough. It's funny when you said that, when you asked the question, the very first thing I thought of, and it's nonfiction, so maybe it's cheating. But Bill Bryson, who's like most famous for probably A Walk in the Woods on the Appalachian Trail and those kind of books. My favorite book of his is At Home. And the whole premise of the book is he's in his house and he looks at a room and then he tells the history of that room. So how did the living room come to be? Around what time historically did we develop this thing? What are the traits and trappings? Okay, now I'm going into the bathroom. When did indoor plumbing occur? And now I'm going upstairs. When did we have a second floor? And why did we start having privacy on the second floor with bedrooms up there? And now I'm in the attic. When did we have an attic? And what was the function of the attic? Like, to me, like that was fascinating. And it's not really a narrative, but I
The
love
travelogue.
Yeah, it's a travelogue in your own house.
Wow. So
Anybody?
one that comes to mind is Stingray Summer. Has anybody ever heard of that? It's a Minnesota writer, and he literally grows up in Bloomington, and it's all about wanting a Stingray bike. And for those of us who are old enough to remember the Stingray bikes with the banana seats and the monkey bar handlebars and everything, but it's all about this Stingray bike, and it's probably just sticks out in my mind because it takes place when I was a kid up in the suburbs of Minneapolis. But he wrote beautifully about that bicycle.
I mean, Moby Dick is not a mundane tale at all, but that's kind of some of those dramatic things like Moby Dick or Jack London. And I mean, his main characters are critters, animals. It might be a whale, it might be a dog or wolf, or, some of those things are books that sort of stand out in my mind. And I mean, I read them many, many years ago, but yeah. I'm blanking out the title of and the author right now of one of my favorite books, but it was this like saga. It went on and on, but it was the only book besides the Bible that I've read twice. And I should have, if I thought about this ahead of time, I would have come up with a name. It'll come to me.
Well, Moby Dick's subtitle was The Whale. And actually, I think when it was originally published, that was its original title, was just The Whale, which is hilarious in terms of like super ordinary mundane, right?
Yeah.
Well, that leads to a question I always wonder about people. Christine just mentioned it. So how many times do you reread a book?
Yeah, only once, except my own ad nauseum.
No, I mean, you have several, you mentioned a couple, but, I mean, there are several that I'll reread often, and some I mean to, but I haven't.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're good, it's like, I mean, people go, "You just read that. You already read that. What's the point?" I go, "Well, I enjoy you know, pepperoni pizza. I'll eat it again because I can't say, well, I already ate one of those."
I will admit I've done it by mistake because I read, you can see a little bit of my library. I read so many books and I'll start reading the book and it's like, and I forget the title.
Mm.
I'm not very good at title or authors. And I went, oh, I'm halfway through. It's like, why does this seem so familiar? It's like, oh, I read this already.
I've done that too.
Yes.
I want to go back to Rob's question about people who take the mundane. And I don't think of any one particular book, but I think of two authors who I really enjoy who do that. One is Louise Penny and another is William Kent Kruger. And I think both of them are really good at capturing kind of the ordinary, the feeling of a place, kind of the mundane of what's going on, and ratcheting the story up from there. And I actually bet that each one of the six of us, if you gave us a mundane part of life, object, location, whatever, I bet we could each come up with a story that would grow out of that, and we would have fun doing that.
Sounds like a fun activity.
Yeah.
Sounds like
In our
an
spare time.
anthology to me.
Yeah.
Michael?
Michael, to answer your question, I guess just to offer some thoughts is I don't really reread very many books, but when I was teaching, I definitely reread, mainly just to make sure that, the book was fresh in my brain when I was teaching a class. But the one book that I have read more times than any is Don Quixote, which is my favorite book. And it helps that it's 950 pages, so it's long. You can kind of live in the book for a while. But every time I read that book, I get something else out of it. I notice some new thing or some element of it stands out to me more. And it's fascinating because it's 1609 and 1615, I think, for the second part. And that second part is the one that most people don't realize he wrote. Like the first part is, chasing at windmills and all the goofy things. And the second part is so metafiction. It's really crazy because in it, they are walking around and everybody knows, all the people they encounter know what happened in the first book. So they know these private moments that Quixote and Sancho, didn't think anybody else was listening or around for. And they're like, how do you know that happened? And it's because this book is circulating out there for the world to have read. And so I read that and I'm just like, God, how did he come up with this that far, that long ago? And how did it find a readership that was like, yes, this thing is what I would like to read, that it's going to continue to be reprinted and rerun and retranslated year after year. So
just remember
it's fascinating. I mean, for me, just real quick, is that in some cases it's, rereading at least certain books, stories, there's things that you missed the first time that you go, now that you know the complete story, like, oh, there's these little bits in the beginning or the middle that tie into something that you weren't aware of, or you see them again and go, oh yes. And as a writer, storyteller, I go like, I'll pause. I just can't get through a book. It's like, wait a minute, how did they do that? I'll put a post-it note there so I can go back later. Like, wait a second, that's good. How did she do that? I gotta remember that.
Yeah. It's almost like you read it once for enjoyment and then another time for craft. Like, how did that work?
Yeah, reading it like an author is different than reading it as a fan.
Yes.
For sure.
Well, also
I do the post-it note thing, but what I'm usually looking for is that nugget, that one line that makes the book memorable, or something. And almost every book has something like that.
Well, and also, there may have been a book that impacted you very young. And so, previous conversation with Michael and Rob, we talked about Ray Bradbury, still a perennial favorite of mine. But also, I remember reading William Least Tate Moon, Blue Highways, as a very young individual and just being fascinated by it. And just loving it, embracing it, and actually letting it chart a course of life for a while. And then went back and reread it as an adult, and it's like, okay, it didn't have the same impact. It was like, wow, what? I understand what I liked about it, but Boy, I don't understand why it spoke to me as much as it did back then.
I remembered the Thornbirds, McLean McCullough.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, me too. Great
Made
book.
it into a mini series. Yep.
Yeah, probably
Good,
among my
good
top
theme music
10.
on that though. Great theme music for Thornbirds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've been at this about an hour now, a little more, or a little less, I mean. But let's go around the panel and just say what are you working on? What's next for you? This is outside of the subject matter of the panel, but tell us what comes up next for you. Marjorie, let's start with you.
oh. Well, I'm working on two books at the same time, which is a little challenging at times. But one is the fourth novel in this series in northwestern Minnesota, and with the same characters, and it's called Under the Ice. So it takes place during ice fishing season, and the body of a priest is discovered under the ice. So that one I will have finished and out by May.
Wow.
And then the other one I'm working on is a nonfiction book called The Widow's Guide to Power Tools: Interviews with 100 Women Who Have Survived and Thrived in Widowhood. So that one is more of a, self-help book of, so how do you survive this experience, and who has done it well and how have they done it? And very different, it's such a different writing mode than fiction. I can't just make it up.
Interesting. Michael Mallory, how about you? What's on your plate?
I am currently working on the next Henry Lau, Janet Lau mystery. The working title, I think it's going to be the final title, is Fire Horse. And I'm still in the first draft and making interesting discoveries as I go. No publication date set because I still haven't gotten to the first draft, but I'm making progress. That's what counts.
John, how about you?
So I actually have two projects going. The first one is, and this gets back to a conversation we had earlier about what is too much. And it's basically a character in my first book that my editor told me to take out because I was getting too long. And they said this character doesn't need to exist. And I really like this character. And so I was just expanding on this character's life, and it just, you talk about mundane, he's a farmer, but I know that this farmer, not to bore you too much, but like this farmer was a great athlete. His dad died when he was like in the 8th grade, and he had to give up school and take over the family farm. And so, that's a lot of frustration for a young man. He ends up staying on the farm. So everything that goes in beyond that, in with that, that's the book. And then I have a first draft of a children's book that I've written. And we talked about this earlier. I heard a story on NPR, and I went, huh. And I combined that story with my hat collection and came up with the children's book. And so that's written and partially illustrated.
Oh. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, Snow Place Like Home just launched this last week, and poor Cammie Brooks, someone delivers a dead man's body still sitting in his vehicle in her driveway. And so it takes off from there. And I just started my 12th Winnebago mystery. And in my Winnebago series, Sergeant Corinne Corky Alexson and Detective Smoke Dawes are the two main characters. Corky has a real heart for her victims, and she's got good instincts, but she doesn't know everything. So she, works with Smoke Dawes a lot, who is seasoned, smart, and sexy. So there's some personal relationships that ebb and flow through the series. So Corky just gets to the office. She's had 3 days off, and she's going through her mail, and she gets this letter, and it's addressed to her, postmarked 3 days prior in Minneapolis. She opens it up, and it reads, "The first body is behind the old creamery. He's been buried long enough." So it's just like, okay. So why is this addressed to her? Who is the body? the first body? What does this all mean? So that starts the
wow.
story. Yeah.
Wow. Any last comments, statements, suggestions, ideas, mundane things? And, no matter how ordinary they are, they're welcome.
Well, I want to thank Michael Mallory for now I understand how to pronounce the sûreté. Up until today, I never knew how to pronounce that because I knew that Inspector Clouseau always mispronounced it. And now I know. So thank you. I had no idea how to pronounce that.
Well, I just want to say this has just been a great experience, and I have to thank Michael MacBride and Rob Jung for creating this cowbell. Sorry, and we've had several good experiences so far. So, and I loved hearing from everyone.
Well, thank
there's
you.
more to come from Cowbell,
Yeah.
or Bell Cow, or whatever it's called, and including a lot of cow puns.
Right.
So we apologize for those in advance.
Well, I also want to thank you. It's been very fun, and I think it's made me very conscious of how to use the mundane in writing, maybe even more consciously than I was thinking about it before, and how you can twist the mundane to really create interest and tension. So thank you.
There's something extraordinary in ordinary circumstances.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, and I would just add to that, my books aren't serious. I mean, they have serious elements, but there's also humor, which fits my personality. I tend to be too sarcastic to write dark stuff. And so that allows me, though, to look at certain discoveries in books or while I'm writing, some ordinary thing. I can describe it in a way that's different or funny. Because if I was writing seriously, then that would be off-putting or would clash with the tone. But if it's not too, there's some humor in the books that allows for that. So that's suitable for me. Going back to your conversation or comment earlier, Rob, about when we were talking about the wolf with the
The bathrobe. Yeah.
That's the kind of thought that comes to me when I see certain things. So
Love it.
But
like that.
True. I mean, if I can add to that also, when you're writing something serious or intense, you got to back it off for a while. You have to, time to take a break, time to go out and have a beer, try to, get together with friends. You need humor, I think, and romance in these tales to be woven in. Otherwise it's just like, you can only have an adrenaline rush for so long, and then you need to relax. Yeah.
So if
Go ahead, Rob.
Michael.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, through the title of the subject was the mystery of the ordinary, and I think that the trophy goes to Chris today, because I can't think of anything more ordinary than a county commissioners meeting with the highway department. It's just
it's not the most mundane meeting I've ever had either.
Add to that, discussing a peat bog.
With discussing a peat bog on top
all
of
these
that.
years, I had no idea there was a peat bog. It wasn't Wolf Swamp, it was a bog.
Which, Michael, I interrupted. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to share. I did actually find the title of that book with the snail description finally, which was Explosions in the Cathedral by Alejo Carpentier. And he's a Cuban author. And weirdly, his other book, The Lost Steps, those were the two we read in graduate school. They both had long descriptions of snail shells for whatever reason. So it just must be one of those things. I mean, it's not quite a snow globe, but
yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being part of the Story Lab, and best of luck for all your endeavors in the future. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Till we see you next time. As I always say, take time to hug your kids or grandkids and read a good book.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.